So then what I found out, and I would keep studying the research and say, okay, well, what could cause an atlas subluxation, or what would be more important than an atlas subluxation that if you didn't address it, either would keep you in a state of subluxation, keep triggering the subluxation, or would cause the body to compensate in such a way that it set you up for subluxation because you have a distorted posture, or like a lateral scoliosis, for example. Well, I went and found any time there's a problem with the vestibular system, you have to clear that first or none of these things will respond. And then I found out in many cases I would test people's hearing and find that they were tone deaf in one ear. So take a banker who sits there talking about loans all day with people, trying to sell loans, and he can't hear out of his right ear. So he turns his head to the left, doesn't even know he's doing it, but he's got his head turned 14, 15 degrees to the right all day to get his left ear closer to the person. So this person's got chronic neck problems. And if you're constantly turning your neck and then your neck adapts to that position, now your back is torqued because the neck controls the back. The neck's a huge influence over the back. So you see what's happening here. So I thought, well, you got to clear the vestibular system and you got to clear hearing. And I found piles of people with hearing problems that they didn't even know they were having that were causing these kinds of problems. So I said, well, what would be more important than that? So I studied the research. I studied the neural pathways. I studied mountains of papers, and I found that the eyes actually are more influential on the system than the vestibular system, and the ears are. 80% of your proprioception in space comes from your eyes. And then I found research all the way back from like the 1930s and 40s, and actually as far back as 1925. One of the authors is Lomax. I can't remember the other one right now. But they actually found an orthopedic surgeon. I found research, and the orthopedic surgeon was running into the same kinds of problem that I was having. Back patients that weren't responding. And he made friends with an ophthalmologist. And the ophthalmologist said, well, I've found that when I correct people's eyes, a lot of their back problem goes away. And he said, really? So they started doing research together. And this paper showed the correlation of their research. And they found that 1 out of every 3 chronic back pain patients had an ocular dysfunction. Oh. They either had a visual dysfunction or an imbalance in their eye muscles, and the eye muscles control the entire musculoskeletal system. All you got to do is hook someone up to a 32-channel EMG. You can bolt their head still if you want to, and their whole body. Whatever direction you look, that whole EMG fires up. If you look up, all the extensors turn on. If you look down, all the flexors turn on. You look left, every muscle that rotates you to the left turns on. It pre-facilitates the whole motor system. So if you got an imbalance in your eyes, it will induce a musculoskeletal imbalance, and it will throw the whole system off. And for example, if you've got an exophoria in your left eye, which means the lateral recti is too tight, it'll pull your eye to the left. Your whole body will twist to try to get the eyes into binocular vision, because if you can't maintain binocular vision, and here's another thing, the eye muscles are striated skeletal muscles. So they're susceptible to fatigue just like any muscle that when you exercise. So if your eyes don't rest in parallel binocular vision, they become exhausted, and people get terrible trigger points in their eyes, which refer pain right into their brain and shut down circulatory systems in the brain and cause reflex changes in the autonomic system that shut internal systems down. I've known of 2 cases where someone treating trigger points in the eyes in a blind person had complete restoration of sight, because the trigger points were referring pain into the visual centers, causing so much vasoconstriction it shut down the visual centers in the brain. I've seen wild stuff happen under my own hands in clinical practice because I knew where to look and how to look. So what you find out is everyone that sees me gets an eye exam. You can see the eye chart right at the end of the hall.
Yep.
I studied neuromuscular therapy. I learned to treat the muscles of the eyes with trigger point therapy using special techniques. I studied pelvic floor therapy. I know how to do intrapelvic work. I'm trained in that. I had doctors who kept trying to do trigger point injections and couldn't hit the trigger points because their palpation skills were so 13 doctors signed a letter petitioning the state of California to let me go to physician's assistant school to get licensed to give medical injection without having any kind of university degree or anything. And it turns out it's legal in the state of California. So I went to physician's assistant school and got trained in medical injection and would do all the trigger point injections for doctors. So I learned all sorts of stuff about that. Then I studied dry needling with C. Chan Gunn, a famous medical doctor from San Diego, and found out you could do a better job with an acupuncture needle than a hypodermic needle, because hypodermic needles cut and damage the tissue. So you create an injury trying to fix something. So what happened was then I said, okay, well, what might have more power than the eyes? And lo and behold, I found the research showing that every time you have malocclusion, your body will change the position of your head to try to get your teeth to fit together, because if your teeth don't fit together, you open and close your mouth on average 4,000 times a day. So I have a question for you. If your teeth don't fit together and you keep opening and closing, and every time you swallow, your teeth engage, and you eat and you talk, how long do you have before you wear your teeth out?
Oh, are you talking about a couple of years?
You got a couple of years, and you can watch the teeth shrinking. I've seen 1,000 cases of it. They lose vertical dimension. When you lose vertical dimension in your teeth, then your temporomandibular joint sinks up into the temporal bone and compresses the neurovascular supply to the temporal mandibular joint, and now you get degenerative changes in the joint. You get tremendous pain. And then I found studies by Irvin M. Core, the collected papers of Irvin M. Core, who was hired by the American Osteopathic Association to do years of research to try to prove physiologically how chiropractic and osteopathic manipulation worked. And his research was mind-boggling, and he showed you can put a 1 millimeter shim between people's teeth anywhere in the jaw, anywhere in the bite, any tooth, and it will cause the musculoskeletal system to go crazy. And he had multi-channel EMG research showing this. Now, so I have a question for you. Have you ever got a sesame seed stuck in your tooth before?
Yes.
And what does your tongue do trying to get that son of a bitch out of there?
It won't stop.
It won't stop. You will injure yourself.
Yeah, the tongue will get raw just trying to get it out.
Why? Because your jaw has to fit together, and your jaw muscles are wired to your upper cervical spine and your eyes. You have an oculocervical pathway. So if anything affects the eyes, it affects the neck and the jaw. If anything affects the jaw, it affects the eyes and the neck. And the eyes, neck, jaw, and vestibular system are all wired together, and they control everything below your head.
Boom.
Oh.
So that literally is like a survival instinct when your tongue's going crazy because your jaw's not fitting correctly, and it goes. There's no way to turn your tongue off because your body recognizes there's huge problems coming your way.
And your tongue is actually an internal organ.
Yeah, your tongue's really important.
It's innervated by the glossopharyngeal nerve.
Super important. And there's some like balance.
My wife says that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's super important.
So
probably the second most important thing I've got going on.
So then I said, okay, who's the best at jaw stuff? So I found Mariano Roccabato, who's a professor of physical therapy and has a PhD in dentistry at the University of Santiago, Chile. And he comes to the United States, and this is a long time ago. So I studied every one of his courses. I did his TMJ training and his advanced TMJ training 3 times because it's very complicated, but I mastered it, right? So then I said, okay, now I've got to not only check everybody's sacrum, I got to check their emotional system. We didn't get into that one yet. I got to check their glands and organs. I got to check their upper cervical spine. I got to check auditory vestibular. I got to check eyes. I got to check teeth. And I said, holy shit, every single person I found that was failing in the medical system that was an athlete with chronic problems, I found not only 1 or 2, but I often found 25 problems in here, right? And I learned by studying and training intensively all over the world how to address a lot of these things, how to do manual therapy, how to do muscle energy techniques, how to do mobilization techniques, how to do soft tissue therapy, how to do trigger point release, how to release the fascia, how to normalize the system. There's a lot of training involved. Yeah. Now, you know, it takes 7 years to finish your training as a Chek professional. It's deep stuff. And I have medical doctors in there, podiatrists, people from all over the world in every profession come to take my training because they don't learn this stuff in school. Nowhere. Okay? So then, to make a long story short, I said, okay, well, what's even more powerful than the jaw? Breathing. And I looked at the research of
so I have learned.
Yes, and I looked at the research of Major Bertrand Desjardins, a famous chiropractor who back in the 1920s got very rich because he invented one of the first systems for processing film. He was a chiropractor, but he was a genius, and he figured out how to process film, sold his ideas to Kodak, made millions of dollars. And so he was getting such great results with chiropractic, but he couldn't figure out how some of these results were happening. So he hired somebody to do research for him. And most doctors, I've never met a single doctor that realizes this, but guess what the name of the man he hired to do research for him to figure all this stuff out? And when I tell you, I bet you'll know if you've done any research on the human body. Arthur C. Guyton, the author of Guyton's Textbook of Physiology, which is used in almost every medical school, physical therapy school, chiropractic school, anywhere in the world, because it is the definitive text on human physiology. And what medical doctors who hate chiropractors don't know is that their whole research, the whole book, was largely funded by a chiropractor's research, and Guyton learned all that stuff working for a chiropractor. How's that?
I love how hilarious you think that is.
It's hilarious. It's hilarious, right? So the Guyton Textbook of Physiology was largely funded by a chiropractor who was so fascinated that he could get these results but couldn't figure out how.
Yeah.
So just like the American Osteopathic Association hired what's his name? Irvin M. Kaur, who's an amazing man. I don't know if he's alive anymore, but I've been to lectures with him. When this guy was 85, 88 years old, he was sharp as a tack, funny, a genius of a man. I mean, I love Irvin M. Kaur. And his research, if you read it today, if you just get the collected papers of Irvin M. Kaur, which was done in the late 40s and early 50s, it's rocket science even today, and most people don't even know about it. And I'm like, you guys got all these fancy fucking degrees. You don't even know what the real research is. You don't know where all this stuff came from. You haven't looked at the good stuff. You're getting all this fluffy shit. You know?
I think I've got a couple decades of reading to do. Just standing here.
Minimum.
It's taken me.
You can pay rent over there in the library.
I've been doing this. I've been doing this for 32 years, and my wife can guarantee you the studying has been intensive because there's a fucking lot to know. This is what I tell people. Look, you got personal trainers in the gym that can get their goddamn personal training certification out of a bubblegum machine, pass 75 multiple question tests on the internet. I say, look, physical therapists play with pink dumbbells and stretch cords.
Yeah.
But you got people with their body weight to 2 to 3 times body weight on their back, and you're torturing them. And did you realize 72% of people have an undiagnosed disc bulge ready to blow at any time, and they don't even know it? And that's people that have never had an incidence of low back pain. That's solid scientific research using MRI studies. People in gyms are booby traps that are eating crap food, taking drugs, not sleeping, unhappy, and you're getting the shit beat out of them in CrossFit and all this other stuff. And when a guy like me walks in the gym, I can look at any one of you and in about 3 seconds tell you more than your mother knows about you. And I'm watching these people just get the shit beat out of them. And they end up in doctors' offices. I don't have nothing against CrossFit. I just think it's dangerous for people who aren't prepared for it.
I don't think there's anything wrong.
For any sport.
But
it's any sport. It's kettlebells, it's medicine balls, all of it, right? That's why the Chek system's designed to teach you how to assess people and how to build them up progressively, safely, and intelligently. Chek Level 3 is a 9-day course where you learn how to assess all this stuff, and it's the most intense course, and it takes tremendous study to get ready for it. And I've had physical therapists and chiropractors break down emotionally and walk out of my classes because they said, I can't handle this. It's too much for me. I never even dreamed that there was personal trainers, let alone a guy with a 9th grade education that could take me this deep, and they're just not ready to study that hard anymore. This is because I test you on this. There's no faking it and guessing at